Picture the most expensive outfit in the ancient world. Gold thread, stones the size of your thumbnail, 12 of them, each one a different fire. A plate of pure gold across the brow. Bells that ring when the man moves. You're looking at a king, aren't you? You're looking at wealth at rank, at a man who outranks everyone in the room. Now look again, because almost everyone who pictures this man pictures him wrong. That's the part most people miss. We see the gold, and we read it as honor the way we read a crown, or a medal, or a judge's robe. We assume the clothes are there to lift him up, to mark him as better, higher, closer to God, by right. And that one assumption gets the whole thing backwards. Here is what those clothes actually were. Not a costume of honor, a harness of weight. Every thread, every stone, every bell was engineered for one purpose: to let a single man carry an entire nation on his body when he walked toward a God who could kill him. The names of the people on his shoulders, the names of the people over his heart, the guilt of the people on his forehead. He didn't wear those clothes because he was great. He wore them because someone had to be crushed under the load of standing between heaven and a guilty people, and the clothes were how you carried a load that heavy without dropping it. This is not jewelry. This is not rank. This is not decoration. This is a man being dressed as a doorway. And there's something else. The outfit you're picturing right now, all that gold, all those stones, is not the outfit he wore on the single most important day of the entire year. On that day, he took almost all of it off. We'll get to why. Hold that thought, because it changes everything once you see it. There were exactly 8 pieces. The instructions are laid out in the book of Exodus in the 28th chapter in detail, so precise it reads less like a sermon and more like a blueprint measurements. Materials, colors, the order, it all goes on. So let's do what the text does. Let's dress him, from the skin out, one piece at a time. And with each piece, ask the only question that unlocks the whole design, not, how much is it worth? But what does it make him carry? Start at the layer no one ever sees. Before the gold, before the stones, before any of the splendor that would catch the desert sun, the high priest put on plain linen undergarments. The text calls them breeches linen, reaching from the waist to the thigh. Nothing decorative, nothing anyone in the crowd would ever lay eyes on. And the reason given for them is almost startling in how plain it is. They were to cover his nakedness so that he would not be exposed when he climbed the steps toward the altar, so that, in the words of the old translation, he bear not iniquity and die. Notice where holiness begins. Not at the crown, at the most hidden layer of all. The very first instruction about dressing this man is about what stays covered, what stays private, what no one will ever see. Before he carries anything for anyone else, the design says the hidden parts of you matter to God too. The place no crowd can inspect is the place holiness starts. And already you feel the temperature of this room, because that little phrase keeps surfacing, that he die not. It's in the instructions for the bells. It's in the instructions for the undergarments. Over and over, woven right into the tailoring notes, a quiet reminder that this is not dress-up. This is a man preparing to step into a space where a wrong move ends him. We are not guessing about that danger. Stay with me, because 2 of this man's own sons are about to make it terribly clear. Over the linen breeches comes the second piece, a long tunic of fine white linen reaching down to the feet, woven in a checkered pattern across the whole cloth. In Hebrew, it's the kethoneth. Think of it as the base layer, the white field on which everything else will be hung. Everything gold, everything jeweled, everything that catches the eye sits on top of this plain white foundation. And there's a detail in the weaving you'd miss if you weren't looking. The instructions say it's woven as a single piece. No seams stitched together, one continuous garment. Keep that quietly in mind, because centuries later, a Roman soldier will gamble for a robe exactly like it at the foot of a cross, and the writers will be careful to tell you it had no seam woven from the top throughout. The pattern was old. The white tunic was the template. Then the third piece. A sash, the avnet wound around the waist, embroidered with blue and purple and scarlet. And a sash means something specific in that world. You belted your robe when you were about to work. A loose robe is for resting, for reclining, for a man with nothing to do. A man who tightens his belt is a man getting ready to move, to lift, to serve. So even the belt is telling you the truth about this outfit. This is not ceremonial standing around. This is a working garment. Somebody is about to carry something heavy. Now who is the somebody? Up to this point, I've been saying, the high priest, as if he were a type of role, a uniform with no face inside it. But there was a first face. There was a first man God called by name to wear all of this. His name was Aaron, older brother of Moses, the one who had spoken for Moses in front of Pharaoh when Moses said he was slow of speech, the one who had held up Moses' tired arms on the hilltop while Israel fought in the valley below, and the one, let's not be sentimental about him, who had also melted the people's gold into a calf and watched them worship it while his brother was up on the mountain. That is the man God chose to be the first to wear the holy garments. Not a flawless man, a real one. A man who had already failed badly with gold in the wilderness now asked to carry gold of a very different kind. And here's a thing easy to read past. Aaron did not dress himself. When the day finally came, it was Moses who took the garments and put them on his brother piece by piece. Moses tied the sash. Moses set the robe. Moses placed the breastpiece. The man who would carry the nation was himself clothed by another's hands. He stood still and let the weight be laid on him. He didn't reach out and seize the office. It was put on him. Remember that picture, a man standing, arms perhaps slightly lifted while someone else does the dressing. We'll come back to a mountain where the exact reverse happens, where the same garments come off one piece at a time by someone else's hands. But that's the end of the story. We're still at the beginning. Now why all this fear? Why does the tailoring keep muttering that he die not? Because this was not a theoretical danger. And the proof is the worst kind of proof. It's personal. It's Aaron's own sons. Their names were Nadab and Abihu, priests like their father, and not long after the worship system began, they took their censers, put fire in them, and offered what the text calls strange fire, before the Lord fire he had not commanded. We don't get a long study of what they were thinking. We get one terrible sentence. Fire went out from the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Sit in that for a second. These weren't outsiders. These were the high priest's children inside the system, wearing priestly clothes close to the holy things. And the nearness that was their privilege became the very thing that killed them the moment they treated it casually. That is the room this man is dressing to enter. Not a sanctuary in the soft candle-lit sense we might imagine. A place so saturated with the presence of God that carelessness is fatal. A place where being close is the most dangerous thing you can be, unless everything is exactly as commanded. So now you understand the weight of every instruction. The breeches that he die not. The bells, as we'll see, that he die not. This is a man being suited up for the most dangerous job a human being could hold. And we've still only got the plain linen on him. The gold hasn't even started. Here's the part nobody tells you. The next piece they hang on him doesn't just carry weight, it makes a sound. And that sound was the difference between a living man and a dead one behind a curtain no one else could cross. The fourth piece is a robe. In Hebrew, the me'il. And it's the first piece with real color, a deep, solid blue, woven all in one, with an opening at the top reinforced so the cloth wouldn't tear when it was pulled over the head. Blue head to almost the floor. On a man already in white linen, the blue would have read like a column of sky. But the robe isn't remembered for its color. It's remembered for its hem. Because around the bottom edge, the instructions order something strange and beautiful. Pomegranate's little woven fruit in blue and purple and scarlet, and between each pomegranate, a bell of pure gold. A bell, a pomegranate. A bell, a pomegranate. All the way around the hem. So when the high priest walked, he chimed. Every step he took inside the holy place, the gold bells along his feet sang out. And then comes the reason. And the reason is the coldest line in the whole wardrobe. The old translation puts it like this: His sound shall be heard when he goeth in unto the holy place before the Lord, and when he cometh out, that he die not. That he die not. There it is again. The bells were not music. The bells were a heartbeat monitor. Think about what that sentence is quietly telling you. As long as the bells were ringing, the man was moving. As long as the man was moving, the man was alive. The sound traveling out from behind the curtain told everyone waiting outside one thing: And only one thing, he's still on his feet in there. He survived another step in the presence of God. The chime was the proof of life, and the moment the bells went silent, that was the moment your blood ran cold. Now, this is exactly the place where you've probably heard a story. Maybe in a sermon, maybe online. The story goes that they tied a rope around the high priest's ankle before he went behind the curtain, so that if the bells fell silent, if God struck him dead in there, the other priests could haul his body out by the rope, because no one else was allowed to step inside and retrieve him. It's a haunting picture, a golden chain on a man's foot, a corpse dragged out of the holiest room on earth. And I want to be honest with you because this channel is about what the text actually says, not about what makes the best goosebumps. There is no rope in the Bible. There's no rope in Exodus, no rope in Leviticus. Stay with me because this matters. That rope is not in the writings of the historian Josephus, who described these garments in enormous detail in the 1st century. It's not in the Mishnah. It's not in the Talmud. The earliest place anyone has ever found it is a Jewish mystical text from around the 13th century, more than 1,000 years after the temple was already gone. The rope is a legend. A powerful one, a sticky one, but a legend. And here's the part that's even more interesting than the myth. We'll come back to it, but file it away now. On the one day, this rope story is always told about the Great Day of Atonement, the holiest day of the year. The high priest wasn't even wearing the bells. He wasn't wearing this blue robe at all, which means even the story's own logic falls apart. There were no bells to fall silent. Hold that. It's a thread that's going to pull the whole design open near the end. So set the rope aside. You don't need it. The truth is quieter and heavier. The bells alone carried the whole weight of it. A man walks into the presence of a holy God, and the only thing the people he carries can do is stand outside in silence and listen. Listen for the chime that means he's alive. Listen for the rhythm of a man bearing them through a door they cannot follow him through. That's not decoration on a hem. That's the sound of somebody risking his life on your behalf and letting you hear his pulse while he does it. And what was he carrying through that door? Whose weight exactly was on him? That's the next two pieces. And it's where this stops being about fabric and starts being about names. Your name if you'd been there, carved in stone, in two different places on his body. Watch. The fifth piece is the one everyone has heard of, even if they couldn't tell you what it was. The ephod. In Hebrew, the same word ephod, and the 1st century historian Josephus, who saw priests wearing this very thing, said it resembled what the Greeks called the epomis, the shoulder piece. Hold on to that word shoulder because it's about to become the whole point. The ephod was a kind of apron woven of gold and blue and purple, and scarlet front and back joined together at the shoulders by 2 straps. And on each of those 2 shoulder straps sat a single large onyx stone clasped in gold. So far, it sounds like more jewelry. It is the opposite of jewelry. Watch what's carved into those 2 stones. The instruction is exact. Take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel. 6 names on the one stone, 6 names on the other. The 12 tribes. The entire nation split into 2 sets of 6 and cut into stone, the way a craftsman cuts a signet ring deep and permanent meant to leave its mark. And then the reason. And this is the sentence the whole design has been building toward. Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord upon his 2 shoulders for a memorial. Bear their names. On his shoulders. There's the word from the very beginning, carry. Now you see what he carries. People, the names of actual families, actual tribes, actual human beings lifted up and set on the strongest part of his body. Not as ornament, as cargo. Why the shoulders? Think about your own body for a second. When you have to move something heavy, a beam, a child who's fallen asleep, a sack, you can't leave behind. Where do you put it? On your shoulders. The shoulders are where the body carries what it refuses to drop. They are the load-bearing place. So when God designs this outfit and sets the names of the people on the shoulders, he is saying something without saying it. These people are a weight, and the priest's job is to carry the weight all the way in and not put it down and not leave anyone behind. And here is where one Hebrew word cracks the whole thing open. The stones are called stones of memorial, a memorial before the Lord. We hear memorial, and we think of a plaque on a wall, a monument. You walk past a thing that helps us remember the dead. Cold stone, cold word. But the Hebrew is zikaron, and zikaron is not about the priest remembering, and it's not about the people remembering. Read the verse again. It's a memorial before the Lord. The remembering is God's. That changes everything. The names aren't carved into the stone so Aaron won't forget his people. They're carved so that every time this man steps into the presence of God, God sees the names. The whole nation presented, held up, as if to say, remember them. Remember these. The high priest walks in, and on his shoulders, the people walk in with him, name by name, into a room not one of them could survive entering on their own. Stop and feel the size of that. If you'd been an Israelite, you were not some faceless number in a camp of hundreds of thousands. Your tribe's name was cut in stone on a man's shoulder, and once a year, that name was carried into the holiest space on earth and held up before God. You were carried by somebody stronger into a place you could never go yourself. That's the shoulders. But the design isn't done with your name yet, because the very next piece takes those same 12 names and moves them off the shoulders to a place that means something completely different. And the move from the one place to the other is, I think, the most tender thing in the entire wardrobe. The sixth piece is the breastpiece. In Hebrew, the Choshen and the text gives it a fuller name, the breastpiece of judgment. It was a square of the same woven gold and color as the ephod, folded double like a pouch about a span across the width of a spread hand. And it was mounted on the chest, fastened by gold chains to the shoulder straps above, and blue cords to the ephod below, so it sat squarely over the center of the man, over his heart. And set into it, 4 rows 3 across, were 12 gemstones: a sardius, a topaz, an emerald, a turquoise, a sapphire, a diamond, a jacinth, an agate, an amethyst, a beryl, an onyx, a jasper. 12 different fires, no two alike. And each stone, the text says, engraved like a signet with a name. 1 per tribe. Now stop! You've seen these 12 names already. They were just up on the shoulders, cut into the 2 onyx stones. So why carve them again? Why put the same 12 names in a second place on the same man, just a few inches lower? Because the second place is the heart, and the move from the shoulder to the heart is the move from strength to love. Listen to how the verse says it. Aaron shall bear the names of the children of Israel in the breastplate of judgment upon his heart, when he goeth in unto the holy place for a memorial before the Lord continually. Same verb bear, same names, new location. On the shoulders the names said, I am strong enough to carry you. On the heart the same names say, and I love you while I do it. Think of anyone who has ever carried you. A parent? A partner, a friend who showed up. There are 2 ways to be carried. You can be carried like luggage, efficiently, dutifully, a load to be moved from here to there. Or you can be carried like a child who is loved, held close against the chest, where the one carrying you can feel your weight as something precious, not just heavy. God designed this outfit so that the priest carried the nation both ways at once. The shoulders for the strength of it, the heart for the tenderness of it. 12 names on the back of the body that lifts 12 names on the front of the body that feels. You were never just freight. You were freight that someone held over his heart. And that word continually matters. Before the Lord continually. Not once in a blue moon. Not on good days. Every single time he walked in, all 12 tribes went in over his heart. The faithful tribe and the faithless one. The strong and the struggling. The ones who deserved it and the ones who absolutely did not. He didn't get to leave the difficult tribes outside. The design wouldn't let him. All 12, every time, close to the heart. But the breastpiece held one more thing, and it's the strangest object in the entire wardrobe, an object the Bible names, places in the priest's hands, and then almost never explains. Inside that folded pouch over the heart, the instruction says, you shall put the Urim and the Thummim. And the names mean something haunting. Urim and Thummim. Most simply, the lights and the perfections, or the lights and the whole, the complete. We are never told exactly what they physically were. Stones, lots, objects of some kind. We are told what they were for. This was how Israel asked God a question and got an answer. A yes. a number, a direction at a fork in the road. When a leader didn't know whether to go to war, whether to advance or wait, the priest could inquire of the Lord by the Urim, and an answer would come. Sit with how strange and wonderful that is. Carried over the high priest's heart in a pouch of woven gold was the nation's direct line to the voice of God. The names of the people on the outside of the breastpiece, the will of God, accessed from the inside of it. The man wore the questions of a whole nation against his chest, and inside the means to hear heaven answer, which raises a question that's going to turn cold in the next breath. What happens to a man, to a nation, when he reaches for that line, and heaven says nothing back? There came a night when a king reached for that line, and heaven gave him nothing. His name was Saul, the first king of Israel, and on this particular night, an army of Philistines was massed against him, more of them than he'd ever faced. And the text says, when he saw that host, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. So he did what you do when you're a king and you're terrified. He asked God what to do. He inquired of the Lord. And then comes one of the loneliest verses in the Old Testament. When Saul inquired of the Lord answered him, not neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. Neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. Every channel God had ever used to speak to his people, every single one went dark at once. And notice the middle word in that list. Nor by Urim, the oracle. The lights and perfections in the pouch over the priest's heart. The direct line. Saul reached for the one thing that was designed to answer, and it stayed silent. The lights gave no light. That's the terror this object could hold. It wasn't a vending machine for answers. It was a relationship, and a relationship can go quiet. Saul had spent years drifting from God, ignoring him, disobeying him, and now, on the worst night of his life, he discovers that a line you've stopped using can go dead in your hands right when you need it most. He had the form of access and none of the answer. And the very next thing Saul does, desperate, abandoned, out of options, is go find a medium in the dark, the exact thing God had forbidden, because if heaven won't speak, he'll claw at anything that will. That's where the silence drove him. So the breastpiece over the heart was never a magic charm. It was a connection. And the whole tragedy of Saul is a man holding the memory of a connection he let go cold. Pause there for a second. Because if anything in this has started to land for you, the weight, the names, the silence. That's exactly the kind of thing worth sitting with and worth coming back to. If this channel keeps opening up the Bible in a way that makes it feel like this, subscribe so the next one finds you. Now let's finish dressing him, because we're almost to the top of his head, and the last two pieces take the burden to the one place it hasn't touched yet. The seventh piece is the turban. In Hebrew, the mitznefeth, a wrapping of fine white linen wound around the head. On its own simple back to plain linen, the same humble cloth we started with at the very bottom layer. The man is bracketed top and bottom in plain white, but the turban isn't just a head covering, it's a mount. It exists to hold the eighth piece, the final piece, the one that turns the whole outfit into a sentence. And to understand that last piece, you have to know where it sits. Not on the shoulders where the names were carried in strength, not over the heart where the names were carried in love. Higher, on the forehead, the most visible part of a person. The part you see first when someone walks toward you. The part that in the Bible again and again stands for a person's open identity, who they are declared out front for everyone to read. That's where God puts the last and heaviest word of the entire wardrobe. Watch. The eighth and final piece is a thin plate of pure gold, worn on the forehead, tied over the turban with a cord of blue. And engraved across it in the same deep signet cut as the names on the stones are three words. In Hebrew, it's Tu Kodesh La YHWH. In the Old English, it reads, Holiness to the Lord. That's the crown of the whole outfit. Not a king's crown heavy with jewels, a flat band of gold with a sentence on it. The high priest walked around with a declaration strapped to his forehead, the most visible part of him that read in effect, set apart for God, belonging to God, holy to the Lord. Wherever he turned his face, that's what the people saw first. Not his name, God's claim. And you'd think that's the note the design ends on, the triumphant one, holiness gold the crown. But read the actual reason God gives for this plate, and the floor drops out from under you. Here is why the gold plate sits on his forehead. So that, and I'm giving you the old words because they're almost unbearable, Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things. Bear the iniquity. There's that verb one more time. Carry. We've watched him carry the names on his shoulders, carry the names over his heart, and now on his forehead under a plate that says, holy, he carries something else entirely. Guilt. Not even the people's obvious ugly sins, something subtler and sadder. The iniquity of the holy things, the flaws in the worship itself, the half-heartedness in the offerings, the sin that clings even to people's best attempts to be good, even to the gifts they bring to God with the right intentions. Even our holiness is stained, the design admits. Even the good we offer needs someone to carry its guilt. So picture the whole man now fully dressed. The names of the people are on his shoulders in strength. The same names are over his heart in love. And the guilt of everything, even their worship, is on his forehead under the word holy. Shoulders, heart, head. He is carrying the entire nation in 3 different ways, on 3 different parts of his body all at once. That is not an outfit. That is a man being slowly buried under other people on purpose by design, so that they could come near a God who would otherwise consume them. Now, remember the thread I asked you to hold from the very beginning. The promise that all this gold was not what he wore on the most important day of the year. Here it is. The most sacred day in Israel's entire calendar was the Day of Atonement. 1 day a year, and 1 day only, the high priest would pass through the inner curtain into the most holy place, the very room where the presence of God rested over the ark, to make atonement for the sins of the whole nation. The single most important act a human being performed all year, the deepest possible step toward God. And for that step, he took the gold off. The book of Leviticus is explicit about it. Before he goes behind that final curtain, the high priest strips. Off comes the breastpiece with its 12 fires. Off come the shoulder stones. Off comes the blue robe and its bells. Off comes the gold plate that says, Holiness to the Lord. He bathes his whole body in water. And then he puts on nothing but plain white linen. He shall put on the holy linen coat, and he shall have the linen breeches upon his flesh, and shall be girded with a linen girdle, and with the linen mitre shall he be attired. The richest dressed man in Israel enters the holiest room on earth dressed like the poorest. No gold, no stones, no names on display, no bells, just white linen, the same humble cloth that touched his skin at the very bottom, now the only thing he wears. Why? Sit with this, because it's the whole point of everything we've seen. The gold was for the people. The linen was for God. All that splendor, the stones, the bells, the plate, the color was, in a sense, for the eyes of the watching nation. It declared to them what their priest was and what he carried. But you cannot carry glory into the presence of glory. You cannot walk into the room where God himself is and put your own magnificence on display. In that room before, that presence, even the high priest is just a man, washed, stripped down, standing in plain cloth, depending on nothing he wears, and everything on the blood he brings. The gold was the costume of his office. The linen was the truth of his condition. And on the one day it mattered most, God required the truth. That's the reversal hiding inside the whole wardrobe. We started thinking the gold was the honor. The gold was the burden, names, and guilt weight on every part of him. And the linen, the plain and unimpressive linen, the thing a slave might wear that turned out to be the holiest clothing of all, because it was the only thing humble enough to wear into the presence of God. So let's go back to where we started. A man standing still, being dressed by someone else's hands. Moses lifting each piece onto his brother Aaron, the tunic, the robe, the ephod, the breastpiece, the plate. The weight laid on him piece by piece, because no one carries a burden like this by reaching out and grabbing it. It has to be placed on you. Now watch the other end of that man's life, because the same picture comes back, and it comes back inside out. Years later, on a mountain called Hor, an old Aaron climbs up in the sight of the whole nation. And there, God tells Moses to do something that must have felt like a kind of death before death. The book of Numbers records it plainly. Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them upon Eleazar his son. And Aaron died there in the top of the mount. Read that slowly. The garments come off. One by one, the same pieces Moses once put on Moses now takes off and lays them onto Eleazar, Aaron's son, the next high priest. And the moment the clothes are transferred, Aaron dies. The man was never the point. The office was. The clothes outlived the man wearing them and passed to the next mortal who would also wear them and also die and also pass them on. Generation after generation, the same garments, a new set of shoulders underneath, because every man who ever bore that weight eventually had to set it down. Death stripped every single one of them in the end, and history made that ache almost unbearably literal. Fast forward more than 1,000 years to the time of Jesus. By then, Israel was under Roman rule, and the Romans understood something about these garments that no enemy should have understood. They understood that whoever controlled the clothes controlled the priest. We know this because the first-century historian Josephus tells us in detail. The sacred vestments, the very robes we've just walked through, were no longer kept by the priests at all. They were locked away in a Roman fortress, the Antonia, that loomed over the temple courts. And the high priest was allowed to collect them only a few days before each major festival. Josephus says they were handed over 7 days before, and that the moment the feast was finished, the priest took them off and the Romans locked them up again. There was even a Roman guard who kept a lamp burning in that stone chamber, watching the holy clothes of Israel like a jailer watching a prisoner. Think about what that means. The outfit designed to carry a whole nation into the presence of God and a pagan empire kept it under lock and key and handed it out like a permission slip. The man could not even put on the burden until Rome said he could. The clothes that were supposed to make him the freest mediator in Israel had become the leash that proved he wasn't free at all. The priesthood that started on a mountain with Moses' own hands now waited at the door of a Roman armory for someone to unlock the cupboard. That is how far it had fallen. And it's exactly the moment the story was waiting for. And that is the ache the whole system is built around. Israel needed someone to carry them into the presence of God, but every someone they got was temporary. The bells always eventually fell silent for good. The shoulders always eventually gave out. The names always had to be lifted onto a new chest because the old heart stopped beating. They had a priest. What they did not have was a priest who would not die. Here's where the whole thing has been pointing. Centuries later, the New Testament picks up this exact image, a high priest. The people's names, the entry into God's presence, and says, there is one more. One who is a priest forever. One whose office never has to be stripped off and handed down because he never dies to lose it. The letter to the Hebrews puts it in a single quiet line. He hath an unchangeable priesthood. And because of that, it says, he is able to save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, seeing he ever liveth to make intercession for them. Ever liveth. The bells never go silent on this one. The shoulders never give out. And remember what the whole wardrobe existed to do, to let one man carry the names of the people into a room no one else could enter. Hold that picture against the moment in the Gospels when Jesus dies, and the great curtain of the temple, the very curtain the high priest passed through one terrifying day a year, tears in two from the top to the bottom. The barrier comes down. The room opens. And the writer of Hebrews draws the only conclusion left: now we can come boldly. Not carried in by someone else's shoulders once a year through a wall of ritual, but walking in ourselves because the priest who carries us is the door, and the door is open, and it stays open. That's why there are no priestly garments in the rest of the story. No new ephod. No new breastpiece. No successor being dressed on a mountain. The uniform of burden was finally retired, not because the burden vanished, but because someone carried it all the way through and never has to hand it off. So here's what to carry out of all this. First, and this is the simple one. Every piece of that outfit was a job, not a jewel. The shoulder stones, the breastpiece, the bells, the gold plate. We see treasure. The design saw cargo. It was a working uniform for the hardest labor in the world, carrying people toward a holy God. Second, and this one's for you, the gold was for the crowd, but the linen was for God. There's a lesson hiding in that for anyone who's ever tried to dress up their way into God's good opinion. On the day it mattered most, the priest came not in his finest, but stripped, washed, and plain. What gets you into the presence of God was never your splendor. It was always your need and the blood that covered it. And third, sit with this one because it's the whole thing. If you had been there, your name would have been on him, carved in stone on the shoulder that carried you in strength, carved in stone over the heart that carried you in love. You were not a face in the crowd. You were a name engraved, lifted up, brought in by somebody willing to be buried under your weight, so you could be near a God you could not approach alone. He wore the whole nation into the presence of God. Then, centuries later, someone wore you in and didn't need the clothes to do it. Of everything we walked through the shoulder stones, the silent oracle that left a king in the dark, the bells that meant a man was still alive. The plain linen on the holiest day, which one stayed with you? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if this opened up the Bible for you in a way it hadn't. Before, there's a lot more where this came from. We do this every week. Take something you thought you understood and walk all the way into it until you see what was hiding inside the whole time.